A failed artist with a toothbrush mustache somehow convinced an entire nation to follow him into the darkest chapter of human history. How did Adolf Hitler, a man who couldn't even get into art school, manipulate the minds of millions? The answer isn't what you think. It wasn't just fear or force. It was something far more sinister and surprisingly simple. Two weapons hiding in plain sight, plastered on every street corner and echoing through every radio in Germany. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how these psychological weapons worked and why they're still being used today. But first, let me take you back to a Germany on the brink of collapse, where desperate people were about to make a deal with the devil himself. Germany, 1923. The country was drowning in chaos. Imagine your life savings becoming worthless overnight. A loaf of bread costing a wheelbarrow full of money. This was hyperinflation at its most devastating. Millions of Germans were unemployed, hungry, and humiliated by their defeat in World War I. The Treaty of Versailles had stripped away their pride, their land, and their hope. Into this perfect storm of desperation stepped a man who understood something terrifying about human nature. When people are broken, they'll believe anyone who promises to fix them. Hitler didn't just offer solutions, he offered someone to blame, and he knew exactly how to deliver that message in a way that would burn itself into every German mind. But how do you convince an entire population to abandon their morals? The answer lies in two simple tools that became weapons of mass persuasion. Walk through any German city in the 1930s, and you couldn't escape them. Massive blood-red posters screamed from every wall, every storefront, every street corner, but these weren't just advertisements. They were psychological warfare disguised as art. Hitler understood something most people miss. Your brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text. While you're still reading a sentence, a poster has already planted an idea deep in your subconscious. The Nazi poster machine was ruthlessly scientific, bold. Primary colors triggered primal emotions, red for anger and urgency, black for power and authority, white for purity and righteousness. Every element was calculated to bypass your rational mind and speak directly to your fears and desires. These posters didn't just show Hitler as a leader, they portrayed him as Germany's savior, rising like a phoenix from the ashes of defeat. Here's the truly sinister part. The posters systematically dehumanized entire groups of people, using grotesque caricatures and twisted imagery. Day after day, week after week, these visual messages hammered the same lies. Fiction slowly became fact in the minds of millions, and once the posters had softened the ground, Hitler's voice and speeches would do the rest. Then came the voice that would haunt history forever. But here's what most people don't know. Hitler wasn't born a great speaker. He was awkward, nervous, and forgettable. So, what changed? He studied. He practiced. He turned public speaking into a dark science of mass manipulation. Every Hitler speech was a carefully orchestrated psychological assault. First, the staging, massive rallies under torchlight, thousands of people packed together, creating an electric atmosphere where individual thinking dissolved into mob mentality. The timing was crucial, too. Evening speeches when people were tired, their mental defenses weakened, their emotions running high. But the real weapon, one leader. And here's the most chilling part. Hitler deliberately scheduled his speeches when people were hungry, unemployed, desperate. He fed on their pain, promising them everything they'd lost. Their jobs, their pride, their place in the world, but every promise came with a price. Every solution required an enemy, and once millions of voices were chanting in unison, thinking became dangerous, questioning became treason. But why did seemingly rational people fall for these obvious lies? The answer reveals something terrifying about human psychology itself. Here's the terrifying truth about the human mind. We don't make decisions with logic. We make them with emotion. and then use logic to justify what we already feel? Hitler understood this better than any psychologist of his time, and he weaponized it with surgical precision. Think about Germany in the 1930s. Millions of people humiliated, broke, desperate for someone to tell them it wasn't their fault. Hitler gave them exactly what they craved, not just hope, but permission to hate. He told them they were victims of a conspiracy. Their suffering had a purpose. They were the chosen, people destined for greatness. But here's the psychological trap that caught millions. In a crowd, individual identity dissolves. Scientists call this de-individuation. You stop thinking like yourself and start thinking like the group. Those massive rallies weren't just for show. They were psychological laboratories. Hitler transformed individuals into a single, mindless organism that moved and thought as one. And once someone accepted one lie, accepting the next became easier. This is cognitive dissonance. Admitting you were wrong about Hitler meant admitting you were wrong about everything. Instead of facing that painful truth, millions doubled down, sinking deeper into delusion. They didn't just follow Hitler, they became him, and that's when the unthinkable became inevitable. But there was one moment, one specific turning point where Germany crossed the line of no return, and the world would never be the same. January 30th, 1933. The day democracy died in Germany, Hitler became chancellor not through revolution or military coup, but through the ballot box. His posters and speeches had done their work so perfectly that millions of Germans willingly handed him the keys to their own destruction. Within weeks, those same propaganda techniques that had won hearts and minds became tools of terror. The posters now screamed for boycotts of Jewish businesses. The speeches called for the elimination of undesirables. The very people who had cheered Hitler's rise watched in horror as their neighbors disappeared in the night. But by then, it was too late. The propaganda machine had created a monster too powerful to stop. Here's what keeps historians awake at night. Hitler's techniques didn't die with him. Every dictator since has studied his playbook. Every demagogue has borrowed his methods. The same psychological triggers that worked in 1930s Germany are still being pulled today in different forms, on different platforms, targeting different fears. So the next time you see a political poster designed to make you angry, the next time you hear a speech that promises simple solutions to complex problems, the next time someone tells you that all your problems are caused by those people, remember Germany. Remember how quickly civilization can crumble when we stop thinking and start feeling. Because the scariest truth about Hitler's rise isn't that it happened once, it's that it can happen again. The only question is, will you recognize the warning signs before it's too late?